Hi, my name is Ken Lasseson. With Microbiome Prescription website. This is the last of the 4 series of online meetings dealing with the site. It has been an interesting series because in preparation, I've had to walk through every page that I present and make sure everything is working. Some of the pages I have not touched or changed for a year and a half or 2 years, and the page was created because somebody made a specific request for something. So I've created the page, not knowing whether or not it will be actually helpful or not, and the page is up there, and whether it's helpful or not, I still not quite sure. But it does give information. I view information as the key for making good health decision. Not vague. Or I think it says, or I think it's that, or to the best of the available information, this is what it is, or this is what is probably not. And especially with the microbiome, where almost all the information we have is a little bit on the fuzzy side, as in we don't have enough studies providing enough details, and often the studies have never been replicated, which means is it or isn't it remains to be determined. Is it an oddity with how the experiment was constructed? Is it because of the sample population having a particular condition which shifts things one way or the other? And the response differs because of where the shifts were. So it is what I call fuzzy environment. So far, I've been happy with people's response and everything else, including cross-validation of suggestions to the literature on what's being studied, and the results has been good. So in general, I've been happy with it. To the point which you say, yeah, it's probably doing as well, if not better than 80 or 90% of specialists. But that is a subjective one. I do have a vested interest in it. Okay, so let's go on and take a look at what we have done. The first one was looking at what you can get without ever logging in, just things sitting there on the side. Look up this, look up that, etc. Or look up the suggestion for a specific condition. For example, you have chronic fatigue syndrome. What suggestions should be taken? Then next one was working with transcribed data. That is data coming from tests, which we don't have. The test provider have not provided a uploadable file, a CSV file in general. A few tests have been able to work with their PDF files to do things accurately, but a lot of tests, it's transcribed, and the problem is often the test indicates high or low without indicating a range of values, and high or low is very subjective, so we were doing the best which we have. And working and what you get when you do a actual upload and what you can do with it. The next session was looking at data from one test alone. So we look at the test, we see all the information we can get from it and what we can do with it, and voila, you should now be actionable from one test. This session is dealing with when you have multiple test results. Typically, you do a test, you take suggestions, and you do another test. One of the question is, are you better or worse in terms of your microbiome? And that is what we're looking at there. We also be looking at, if you have a long time series of tests, how we can take a look at that with a reasonable amount of information. Again, one of the problems is that we don't know what the key information is, and the key information is probably going to be different from person to person, condition to condition, which means I give you lots of information and you have to figure out which information is likely most significant for you, or in consultation with your physician, with your MD. Okay, so let's go on and do a little bit more there. Okay, so basically I've just summarized what we've done in the series of online suggestions. Again, first session was you're looking at almost like a card catalog to a librarian. Often I refer to myself in correspondence as being a librarian rather than a practitioner. I'm not licensed to be a practitioner. I'm well qualified for artificial intelligence and pretty good as a librarian, consequence of doing master's and PhD work. First test results, exploring deeper, and then sample over time, which is where we are at right now. To recap, the purpose of microbiome prescription is to improve health issues. Simple as that. It's free, no charge, etc. If you feel particularly appreciative, then buy me a coffee or whatever, or support the site. Site, I'm willing to fork out the cost of running it from my own pocket, but if you appreciate it, hey, toss me some money, never hurts. And also allows me to do things like add extra memory or other issues when they come up, which there is a quick financial solution for, without having to debate the budget, personal budget. Now, a key aspect is to stop reinventing the broken wheel. Particularly in chronic fatigue syndrome, I keep seeing study after study, somebody coming out with a new concept. Would you think it's this or do you think it's that? And they go off trying to do research, get funding to do research on it, not paying much attention to the fact that 20 or 25 years ago, the same thing was researched with absolutely no results. Now, it could be that they're hoping the new technology will improve it. However, generally, they have all fallen flat on their face, apart from keeping a researcher employed and his paycheck coming in. So the purpose is to also try to not reinvent the wheel. It's trying to work from concrete things and dealing with concrete items, which is documented. And last thing, which is what I'm going to be doing right after this session, is make the latest research more available. As then every week, I go through about 100 machine selected new published in the last week's studies to see if any of them are particularly relevant to what is in scope, as in new substances that cause microbiome shifts, more information about substances that already cause microbiome shifts, and adding it to the database. So the goal is to empower you with the most accurate, complete information which I'm able to produce. Okay, now that I've gone through a spiel session for comparing samples. Okay, when you do comparing two samples, there's two ways of doing it, and ideally both ways would be a thumbs up, positive. One is subjective. Do you feel better? Does one or more symptoms improve? Often that's the only criteria people use. It worked or didn't work, or stopped working, etc. It is subjective. It depends on what mood you're in, depends on if you're having cognitive memory issues, etc. So there's risk there. Some of those things can be improved by keeping a daily tally of things, like, for example, how long do you play a idiot game on the internet or there before your brain gets tired? That's what I did during one phase of my CF chronic fatigue flares. And boredom is a good indication, or fatigue, mental fatigue is a good indication. How long before fatigue was? Another thing which I did was also see how far I could walk without getting post-exertional fatigue, PEM, and which was, okay, measure the distance back there. Next day, I increased it by 10, 20%. Okay, next day, do it again. Oops, I'm getting post-exertional fatigue, or then go home and go back to the prior day after I recover from it, and then keep at that distance, and then 3 or 4 days later, try again. Again, the whole idea is to try to get more objective measurements, more accurate measurements. Chronic fatigue syndrome and other things that causes brain fog are notoriously bad for distorting memories of how you were, which means your subjective judgment is going to be off, or a good chance of being wrong. So key thing is, if you can possibly do physical measurements, how far you can walk without post-exertional malaise, how long can you play a game before your brain really slows down or you start making too many mistakes, or how long till you get bored. Time until you got bored was one indicator for me of recovery. Okay, the other aspect is objective, which is looking at the microbiome. You can also take a look at lab results, but right now getting lab results don't always produce good things, especially for conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome, where you will get all of your lab results showing no, which means, okay, so you know last time, you know this time, no change. So what our objective is to see if there are any generic whole, that's WHOLE spelling, microbiome measure improved. So that's what is our main criteria. Again, I apologize for my typo. I'm high functioning autism, but I do tend to have problems with spelling occasionally. Key thing to remember is progress may be slow. We are fixing a we're fixing a population. Think about a country or state. We're fixing. A politician says, "I will fix it." Comes in 4 years later, there may be no change. There may be some improvement. It takes time to fix a population. And you have a population of bacteria. You could do things like reduce crime rate with the right things, or you could reduce unemployment with the right things. That doesn't fix everything at one time. Keep your expectation realistic, because we are dealing with a population of bacteria. So progress may be slow. Don't give up hope. It may be slow. Many measures will not change. Things just won't budge. Same thing as with a human population or a country's population. Some statistics won't budge, other statistics will. And we want basically to have more positive changes showing up than negative changes. If they're more positive than negative, then you are pretty confident things are improving. Not as much as you would like, but they are improving, which is, in terms of treatment, is indicate success. It doesn't guarantee remission. It does indicate improvement, which is the key. So now I'm going to flip over and see about there. And what we have is we have a sample here. Oops. 1 second. Let me get over to the right screen. Okay, so we now are looking at a sample of a person. And if you go take a look at my profile and just flip down here, you can see that this person has been active doing microbiome for 6 years, all the way to Ubiome Day 6 years ago. So we have lots of data to play with for the demo. And since we're dealing with multiple samples, let's go over and use the tab that says multiple samples. Should be very obvious. And now we can go and we select. And what I'm going to do is the current sample is that one. We're going to look at the prior sample. So we are comparing two samples. Keyword is that they have to be from the same lab for most of these comparisons. There are one which you can do different labs, is a bit fuzzy, but you can do different labs. So what we have is we have the numbers, and you can just go straight down and you see no change, no change, no change. That is typical for most people, that things are changed. Some things you see have gone up, and this simply detecting abnormal amount of bacteria, which may or may not be a good indicator. We also see right here is we have 581, we have 800 here. That means we have 60% more bacteria, which means for these numbers are up here, this number need to be multiplied by probably 1.6, which takes it up to be almost the same number. 200 to, yeah. So these numbers are almost the same when you adjust for the number of bacteria reported. We have higher numbers being reported here, but that's because we have higher numbers being reported. So in this case, 43 and 43, these are actually explicit ones, which are at the genus level. So them saying the same is there. Most of these are at the genus level. So what we have is we have had no change. The statistical selections we have change, but if you take 1.6 times that, that ends up being 49, and that ends up 43. So we have actually reduced the number of laughing once you adjust it for the bacteria reported. Again, I picked this sample because it shows some of the issues of interpretation. And in general, what we have here, 1.6, 60, 84, these are about the same, but that's why you need to pay attention to the number of bacteria reported, because these are counts, and the count ratio is a key thing, and that may mean some manual calculation, or I may actually want to go and add, I probably will add in a new column there, which is percentiles. Bacteria over 3042, same thing, 61 times 1.6, slightly more here, slightly more here, under there 1.6. So basically, once we adjust for bacteria per lab, we have numbers for the same. I will go and add in percentages of bacterial count to these, because that will make it clear. Makes the list longer, but it makes things clear. The Sharon Diversity Index was 3.1, now it's 3.3. Generally, the higher the Sharon Diversity Index, the healthier a person is. Part of the aspect, unfortunately, it's partially a function of the number of bacteria, or can be, because when you have a low bacterial count, you have less species, which is what the diversity index is based on. So it looks like an improvement. Symptom diversity has gone down, which also I generally view as improvement. The child index is out in literature. I'm not about to interpret it. We see sound diversity percentages has gone up, which means it's positive, has gone down, which is positive. This one probably is a positive, but again, the child one is one which I not have high degree of confidence. What we have is interesting. The anti-inflammatory bacteria was 13.14, so it has gone up marginally, not a great amount, but it has improved. Rarely seen there, we have more, even adjusting for percentages above, we have more rarely seen than before, which often indicates increased diversity. That's one interpretation. Pathogen has also gone up, but percentage-wise, it's almost the same. Conditions over 1%, we have one condition over basically showing up. We used to have up to 10 conditions, so it means that this person has less matches to existing profiles coming from PubMed studies. So it is, I would read it as a never improvement. Enzymes is converted to percentiles, so it is there, and we have more overproduction now than we have there. Now, overproduction is usually a good sign, because fingernail population, you have too much food around. That generally, apart from obesity, means people are tossing food out. It doesn't cause things. Now, when we go to underrepresentation, you have people starving. Starving people is how the French Revolution started. Starvation tends to breed changes of behavior. Instead of having a bunch of content serfs or semi-content serfs, you have the Russian Revolution happening, etc. So what we have is we have the percentage of enzyme underproducing going down, which is a good sign. At least I perceive it to be a good sign, because it's better to have less starvation happening than more starvation. Compounds, we have more compounds there, gone up, and compounds under, we have, actually they have gone up, which is not ideal, which indicates that there are certain chemicals not being produced in sufficient quantities. You get the enzymes, but the enzyme, what they produce is not the ideal mixture. So we still have things being off and not in a necessarily positive way. K compounds low is also went up high there. Enzyme low has actually is gone from 98 to 22, 32 there. This is a rehash of actually above above. So that takes us through the quick overview. General perception is that where there is a change, there's being improvement. There's being a few areas where they have not been improvement, but some of those we could interpret as being largely the result of the microbiome going through adjustment phases. So now let's go over to details. Now, the details I should warn you about. Most of the time when I do analysis, I just make use of this page. Even when I do a 5 lab analysis, I will literally copy this page, copy and paste into Excel, create a master chart in Excel, and then paste it onto my blog post. This is usually sufficient. The following, however, for some people, especially those with better understanding of processes, etc., is useful, but be warned. We have lots of information. Do not get lost in the forest of information. It will just cause stress, and stress impacts the microbiome negatively. So with that word of warning and that caution, let's go over and look at multiple samples comparisons. So we have a whole ton of labs, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck everything there, mark 5, and there's 2 ones which I were using, and view report. And voila, that's what we have, which we saw in the other report. And this is an earlier form in the same chart before I start consolidating. So it's basically just gives the same information as there. So it's not a new astounding thing. The next choice is Bacterial Taxonomy. And that goes through and lists where you were for each one of the bacteria. 1,000 bacteria are listed. You can go in and take a look at a specific thing. Like, for example, let's take a look at Lactobacillus or that level, and we can go in and see where it is. And what we see is we have, I'm not sure why the colors are there. Or probably I need to check which lab criteria I'm using here. I don't have a choice on top, but that's not unexpected. But basically you see the numbers, which are an important thing. Lactobacillus was 66 percentile, at 89 percentile. The amount you have has gone up by factor of 4, and the count shift. So things have gone up positively there. And let's go over and take a look at bifidol. Again, we can take a look here. Bifidol has actually gone down, so it would imply bifidobacteria, maybe something or things that support bifidobacteria is a factor to be considered. And you can do other things like, for example, Akkermansia, and we see that the person's Akkermansia has gone down a bit, but it's still at 80th percentile, and we're not concerned. Again, we have a abundance of information there. Don't get lost in it. So you can spot check the things which are of most concern to you. Colostridium has gone down from being high to 78%, which is there. You can go and look at a particular type of that. So you can go and explore to your heart content, and usually that can mean several hours on each one of these. Cake products is the same type of report once it shows up. And here we have the criteria is being spelled out, which is the cal-12 mol-12 bounds, and we indicate there, and you can see the person hasn't gone up to desired level, but they have gone up from 18 to 27. They've improved here, they've improved here. So we have the detail of our estimates for these particular things one by one. And in general, we're seeing improvement. Now, if there's a particular enzyme, for example, if you had done a oats test, you could look up the oats test and see whether or not you have a matching there and how the comparisons are for the particular items. Okay, we can also go to click enzymes. Okay, and click enzymes are, we have some items description which are missing names. I need to dig that out. Okay, but once you get in there, we have the names. So I got some digging to do to figure out why no names show up there. Again, part of the aspect of the walkthrough is frequently I discover bugs which weren't there before. Again, we have 2,400 items there, massive saturation. If there are particular items concerned, you simply can search for it. Compound producers, consumers, let's see who are eating and what they're eating, and you can again see the item. We have 1,400 there. Same usual thing. You end up having to know what the particular magic thing names are. We can go through. Oh, let's say if we can see for galactose what the numbers being produced are, etc. The different variations from it. Again, this is really intended for technical people. End product is using very old data, which I don't have great amount of confidence in, but I will do it. And what we have is things like acetic acid. Interesting. Okay, so we see some changes there. A couple of, oh, okay, I know why. I think I know why I got it, so I won't be too concerned about. Many of the numbers are similar. Others indicate a risk, etc. So it gives you again things. Again, I don't have high degree of confidence because the data is more observational and it's slightly problematic. Medical conditions are more interesting. And that is indicating, for example, this particular person. Okay, I thought has Crohn disease, and we have 57 matches with old samples, which is good. And now we have only 28 matches. In other words, from typically very strong match for what is published on PubMed for Crohn's disease, the person has actually gone down to have only one match from 77. That could be effect of the low number of bacteria detected. So you always have to be aware of the fudge factor there, but that is a good indicator. Depression also indicates improvement. High number of depression items greatly reduced, etc. And you can go through and whatever that is. Liver cirrhosis has improved. So you have a whole bunch of things there. Menopause, while the person is getting older, menopause, well, you have one match. Again, we don't necessarily have much information. If you want the information of that, you can just look here and it will go and list the bacteria. And we have only 4 bacteria in this case being used for the selection. So hence, we don't necessarily have enough information to do a good match. So that is a bunch more things to explore. And then we have the same things with outliers there. Now, consensus against samples, I'll go there and it's absolutely blank. And the reason it's blank is that we have not done consensus for things. So we do the 1711. And we do the 2023. Okay, and now fingers are crossed that we will get data. Again, I have not used portions to the site like this thing for probably 2 years, so I don't know if I've broken it doing ever changes. And there we have. Okay, and it looks like there's a, oh, wait a minute. Okay, that page is broken. I need to do it so it will show side by side where suggestions are. Let's try just one, and that comes back with the bacteria. So I got some. Okay, the consensus reports here, both of them are broken, and I'll see about fixing them later this weekend. But they should one case show you suggestions from each samples, and you can start and see how suggestions change between samples for this particular person, and work from there. Okay, now I'm going to go back to multiple samples. I've finished walking through all of those, and now we do multiple samples charts. And what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to uncheck the biome site. And I'm going to uncheck foreign. So we have view biome and private data. And I'm going to look at everything on a chart. And what the chart is, it actually allows you to mix labs across information. And okay, Crohn's, all right, Crohn's disease. This comes from a different database, so it's different matching. But what we can see is person Crohn's was there, active diagnosis of Crohn's. Actually, this was before diagnosis of Crohn's. Diagnosis of Crohn's. With diagnosis of Crohn's was the start of the use of microbiome data to treat it, and you can see that it has unmatched the thing so that you have a lower percentage matching Crohn's, which is what we actually saw with the everything. In terms of PubMed studies, we actually had to go down. Here it goes up. Again, we have fuzzy data which has not been reconciled across things. We can go back and take a look at other things which may be interest. Notice again, using genome repo data, which is a public repository. We can take a look for we had depression being an item, and we can see how depression has also improved. But we notice all of these were for biome data, and all of these were foreign. And it is always a problem when you jump from one to the other, whether or not the numbers are comparable. And autoimmune disease, again, high amount there. bouncing back and forth, which is a bit interesting. What is the... So it's being bouncing back and forth. Again, we have all sorts of things. Let's just check diabetes type 2. And basically low matches and basically looking good there. And that also happens to be reflected in the PubMed literature matches. So that is one of the features using GMO repo data. We can now do the same thing for PubMed data. And again, we can go down and take a look at there we go. And you can see the big spike there. And you can see that it is improving, going down each time. And again, here is when Crohn diagnosis was coming in, and you saw the spike. It was fortunate that we had microbiome samples before and after. And now we can see the impact of applying choices from microbiome prescription that actually has reduced the severity or the number of matches. Not a remission, still at 45%, but you're far less severe than before. Again, let's go over to everything we looked at, which is depression. And we see similar shifts. And actually, you can see probably the first biome sample, I show a significant drop there. And you can do whatever things out. And let's go down to the last one I check, which is type 2 diabetes. And the person doesn't have diabetes, by the way, but it just bouncing around to illustrate the numbers. We had a significant improvement there for whatever reason, and now just bouncing back and forth. So that gives you the chart options. Symptoms from citizen science depends on if the person has put in their symptoms. So I have no idea if the person being good or not. Okay, so we have some of the symptoms. So you can see the percentage matching for symptoms. For example, comorbid, let's try multiple chemical sensitivity. This person does have it, and you can see that the match increases. And technically, the bacteria associated with it are going down, which is a good sign. Doesn't necessarily mean that MCS has disappeared, because after all, what we're talking about is going from 66% down to in the 50s. So it's an improvement, doesn't mean a cure remission. Let's take a look at one other thing. If I can find it, I remember COVID. Okay, there we go. Now these things are ordered by the volume of data, I believe. So we can go through and see what the shifts are. And again, severe spike and down, improvement, but again, we are 66% matched to 54%. So there's improvement, but it's not remission. Perhaps over time we'll get it down lower. Okay, and what else do we have for charts? End products. Again, let's just walk through and take a look. And let's figure out something which is H2, which is often used for SIBO. And we have, the person doesn't have a diagnosis of SIBO, but you can see they're bouncing around. Things were looking pretty good for a while there. And then when you change labs, it jumped and actually has gone up since. Let's see what else. Lactic acid, which affects brain fog. And there we have a spike, and then we have there, and there was a recent spike here. So the key thing would be to watch out for brain fog if it starts happening. Short chain fatty acid. And we can see where numbers are, and the numbers are very stable. Hydrogen peroxide, hydrogen sulfide, another cybo chemical. Again, we can see a spike, and it's very stable. So again, end products are less reliable, but I've kept them there because they seem to have some benefits. And cake enzymes, we have there, we have active ratios. Let's go in and take a look at the ratios. And we have to have a choice of multiple ratios here. We have the fermental, the bacterial ratios there. What ratio should be? Well, we are seeing a shift of ratio towards one way, which may or may not be good. Another common ratio that is there, and I need to go and add in the diversity indexes to this page. So that's another to do for me. Again, the purpose of going through the pages is often the pages are stale, and I need to go and enhance or update them more. Okay, and let's go back to our multiple sample page. Actually, multiple samples. Let's see what we have. Okay, compound consensus. And that one looks like it may be broken. I need to check again. Fecal marrow transplant is, if you're dealing with fecal marrow transplant, I did some blog posts on it. Nobody has asked questions about it, and I haven't refreshed my memory on it. And that's basically, I think, covers everything. I do have a question, and if we can find that question. Okay, and the question was emailed in, person was not available. And the question was whether or not, if they have a old sample where they were reasonably good and then they crashed and went down here on Cascade, does it have advantage to compare the two of them back and forth? I would say yes, it has advantages. However, you have to be careful. First of all, are the labs being okay, let's go and first, all the labs the same. If they are not the same, I would suggest caution because different labs produce different results. If the lab, and the best you can probably do is try looking at the charting. See if you can see a trend there. Very subjective, whatever. The other aspect is to see what your original core problems are, and if they have persisted or being made worse. That may indicate a preferred target to do a bit more emphasis. In other words, what I would suggest is, and I'll do it on screen, is go back to your earlier sample. In this case, we go back to 2017 for a biome sample. Get your consensus suggestions. And now I'm going to go over to multiple samples. consensus across suggestions. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the ubiome samples and the Thrive one. So what we're going to do is we're basically interested in what is common between the two of them, what is common between the two of them, or what's to be avoided between the two of them. Probably indicates more information of how to address the root issues that causes the subsequent cascade. So we have the usual prescription antibiotic drugs, which are there. Let's take a look at amino acid. And we have a bunch of them which are 8. Let's see how many. We'll have only 8 which are in agreement. So those two things are 6-year issues. Those two things probably should have been taken for 6 years. Hopefully, taxiflorin is sort of there. Then we have everything else where there's no pure agreement. Gluten-free diet, fruit-based diet, high sugar diet, which is interesting. Low carbohydrate with high protein diet. Again, diet choices tend to be a little bit interesting, especially with Crohn's disease, because there's very limited ability to change things with diet. Flavonoids. Here are the flavonoids, which are common between the old sample and the new ones. And so these would be on the latest samples and would be on the old ones. And as you can see, their fruit and seasoning caffeine is 887. Rare meat, cranberry is sitting up there. And this person I know just got a whole bunch of cranberry flour, tea, fruit, broccoli. Who person regularly eats it? Extra virgin olive oil, which is interesting. Herbs and spices. None of them are as high value. However, we do have consensus about taking it. Prebiotics and probiotics, particular type of prebiotics are suggested, but only one is suggested across the board. And the others are mixed thing. Mastic gum is not that strongly emphasized. And there, sugars, we have, again, no values so high. Only one is absolute agreement before vitamins there. And we have a good stack of vitamins that all are consensus, and hence they should be being taken all the time. So that is basically how you make use of your oldest microbiome sample and your newest microbiome sample to see what perhaps will address the underlying long-term conditions. So that's basically it. So I've got no other questions in, and at this point in time, I will shut up, get this up online, and more importantly, see about getting those broken items, which I just discovered, because I don't have anybody out there testing the pages. If somebody wants to volunteer and test every page once a month, I would love it, so I can find out where the bugs are. Okay, thanks very much. And at this point in time, I think I'll call a quit.